Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I want to touch on a bit of news. Some revelations made yesterday by Zack Snyder at a special screening for the BvS Director's Cut, where he was asked by one of the attendees there some questions that we've all been wondering for the past several months, a bit longer if we count BvS. At some point we did notice some changes happening at Warner Brothers, and we could not initially see the impact until Justice League, but a lot had happened between the release of the first film and the second. So what did happen? Now, we have gotten some bits and pieces coming from persons who are part of the creative team, and Zack Snyder himself, who has been a bit hesitant to say too much, and understandably so. I mean, Warner Brothers is a studio that he has been working with for several years, and I'm sure he wishes to maintain good relations with them and continue to do other projects, despite being pushed aside, so to speak, right? And so today is the first we've actually gotten some direct answers from him, and it wasn't necessarily the answers that we were looking for, in that he's pretty much confirmed that that the Snyder cut of the Justice League essentially was not shot, right? Now he did say that both himself and Chris Terrio wrote the script for what they originally intended for Justice League. And the studio executives at Warner Brothers became nervous after the mixed response from BvS, and they were asked to rewrite the script, and they did. Now, from what he said, some of what they had intended did make it to translate into Justice League in some way, shape, or form, but not to the extent of what they originally intended, right? And I mean, for the most part, we know that Hollywood is a business, Warner Brothers is a business as well, and more than anything else of importance for them is that bottom line, right? Making a profit. And a film, in their eyes, a film such as Batman v Superman that stars two of the most iconic characters in comic book history, not making it to $1 billion in their eyes was something of a red flag, which I don't agree with, of course. All right, now from what, I'll come back to that in a bit, what Snyder has said of his plans for Justice League. They had originally intended for to kind of flesh out what some of the events that we did see in BvS before, in terms of the Flash coming back through a portal or a boom tube of sorts to warn Bruce of some catastrophic event that happens in the future. And he did confirm that, okay, this was what he had envisioned. Darkseid somehow managed to make it to Earth and actually kills Lois, and in some similarities to Injustice, Superman not necessarily go rogue, but he became influenced by the anti-life equation, which at this point Darkseid apparently possesses, and he instead turns. And we did see Bruce have some vision of a rogue Superman with an army essentially ruling the Earth, right? And the idea was for Darkseid to wipe out most of the inhabitants of the Earth, and with only a few heroes left remaining to defend it and attempting to fix what had happened. And both Bruce leading that rebellion, along with the help of the Flash and Cyborg, attempt to send him back to the past to warn Bruce of the events of the future. And it's a bit ironic, because the studios, on hearing this pitch, according to Zack, thought this idea was too far out, too crazy. Right? It was just not something. I mean, I recall watching BvS and some of the criticisms levied at it in terms of having, during the fight scenes, having entire buildings destroyed or cities leveled, right? and the casualties, or there not be, or the lack of casualties. It's interesting because for most of these characters, they come from a dark past, right? And the idea of loss in a lot of these films usually are centered around symbolism in some way, shape, or form. But in this instance, again, some of the criticisms people levy at the film was that, all right, this building happened to be vacant when these guys were fighting, with the exception of Man of Steel, where they did fight, and of course a lot of people died, which is why Superman was on trial in Batman v Superman. But we could see some of the changes going forward after that, where in the later film, whenever there was a battle, they felt the need to outrightly say, okay, this area is actually abandoned, so there's no one there, so that's how they're able to fight in that area. Which I mean, in this instance, it just makes, we've seen some of them do similar things in Avengers, but and it's not something that I agree with, because in doing that, you kind of lessen the how much of a threat whoever it is or whatever it is that you're fighting actually is. It comes across a bit empty-handed when, all right, a huge battle takes place in the city and no one dies. It just makes no sense for what you're trying to convey to the audience. All right, this guy is so dangerous that he could just literally wipe out cities, but no one dies, right? And so the studios were concerned, all right, we can't have Darkseid coming in and just wiping out a huge part of the population. And ironically enough, this ends up happening in the Avengers later on, where Thanos wipes out half the universe, right? And it speaks to a larger problem. As it is now, we seem to be in this vacuum where it's one extreme or another, right? The movie is either fun or somehow it's dark, and it's too dark. And to be honest, in my opinion, Man of Steel is my favorite of the DCEU films so far, followed by BvS. So while I love BvS, I did wish the director took a different direction with it, and I'll come back to that later. But I didn't consider BvS to be a dark film per se. Now, if you're someone who has watched DC properties, whether you read comics or like me, I read comics here and there, but for the most part, I was introduced to these characters through Justice League Unlimited, of course, and Young Justice, etc., and the Injustice games, whatever it might be. Now, if you're familiar with any of these properties, you do know that, all right, this is not. It's a bit more steeped in realism, right? So a lot of the fun and campiness that comes across in the Marvel films, and don't get me wrong, they work for whatever it is that those films are attempting to accomplish, but the films in the DCU tend to be a bit more grounded in reality, right? And so it's a bit difficult for you to convey that without by stripping down some of the characters, stripping away what makes the characters who they are. It just doesn't particularly work. But as I said, I didn't consider BvS to be dark. We had light moments between Lois and Clark, Clark and his mom, Bruce, of course, Batman. Is a dark character, and even with moments with him and Alfred were some of the funniest moments throughout the entire movie, right? So and Batman himself is a dark character, unless you're going to go back to the 70s Adam West Batman. That's just not his character. And we knew going in that this version of Batman was going to be based on Frank Miller's Dark Knight, which was an older, a more worn, tired Bruce, who's seen a lot, lost a lot, right, over the years, and a bit cynical, right? So this should come as no surprise. This should have come as no surprise to anyone, really. So the irony aside that Thanos ended up in the MCU at least ended up wiping out a version of the wiping out half the universe. when Warner Brothers was too hesitant to have something similar happen in their universe for fear of backlash and people not appreciating that, okay, this is a part of the story, right? So the irony is not lost on me there. And as I said, it's one of those situations where we are in a place where everything is considered to be one extreme or the other. If you look at a lot of the properties now that can't seem to get off the ground, The Crow, Blade, and even Hellboy to some extent, Guillermo del Toro could not get approval, could not get greenlit for the project that he actually wanted to with Ron Perlman to finish, to complete their story. And instead they went with a smaller budget, yes, but also if you looked at the trailer and you compare this version of Hellboy to the previous one, it's a lot of humor, and some seems a bit over the top. Now the movie also isn't out yet, so I can't say whether or not it will be good or not. I still do hope that it is good, but it's difficult not to notice the differences, right? And so that is where we are now, where studios are hesitant to go in that direction. And even if you look back at it, after BvS came out, the studio, Warner Brothers quickly learned that, okay, oops, we dropped the ball here, because following that, they saw the success of Deadpool, and they were like, okay, maybe a somewhat R-rated film, something a bit more adult, can work, and still hesitant. Then they saw the success of Logan, and that shows that, okay, if it's written, if it's well written, if it's directed brilliantly, if you have a dedicated team, the actors, the directors, if they love what they're doing, it can work. Audiences will go and see it if it's a good film, irrespective of whatever the rating is. And again, as I said, BvS was not a dark film, because if you do compare that to Logan, they're not similar, right? So for BvS, what it did is it was thought-provoking in that sense, right? And I, for one, prefer films like that, that forces you to question your place with the universe, in your town, your city, your country, wherever it might be. If you're an immigrant, whatever. In BvS's case, it touched on a lot of those topics, a lot of those socio-political topics that a lot of movies these days are afraid to go anywhere near. The MCU specifically steers far away from those topics, right? And Zack's films have always had symbolism of sorts in it. I've watched his films, and not just the mainstream ones, the 300 and Watchmen, both great, but I actually liked his films going back as Dawn of the Dead and Sucker Punch, which I actually enjoyed. Sucker Punch, I might be in the minority, because a lot of persons had issues with it, but I didn't consider Sucker Punch to be so much an action film. Again, I mentioned symbolism before, and I think that was what was being what Zack was trying to carry across in Sucker Punch itself. It was it touched on prostitution, mental illnesses, escapism, right? For a lot of the women in the movie itself, how they were living in a man's world and how they felt trapped in that world. And to survive, they could rely, and one of the only ways they could survive was to escape, not physically, but mentally and inwards. And imagine these brilliant worlds where they wield the power that they wish they had in the actual real world. And it still to this day is one of my favorite films, right? So symbolism has always been what Zack has been known for. Yes, his films are always visually stunning, but there's always something in the background for you to discover, right? Now back to as for his revelations on Justice League, as I said, it's a bit disappointing that the director's cut doesn't exist, but I don't think it doesn't change the conversation. If anything, it highlights a much bigger one where the studios are afraid to greenlight certain projects now, because They are concerned whether or not it will make $1 billion. And for me, $1 billion is not a marker for success. Yes, you should aim for that, but as with any, whether it's retail, whether you're offering a product or a service, while the bottom line is important, even equally so, or even more than that, is you need to deliver a satisfactory product or service. Otherwise, no one will care, right? And we can push out films that are just action flicks that you'll just watch once and you'll never watch again. But the truly good films manage to stand the test of time, and you will have people revisiting and going back to watch those, right? And that's what you should aim for, at least I believe so. It's, again, mixed feelings, not the response we would have liked, but we're glad to see Zack back. He has a project with Netflix now, going back to his zombie horror roots, and we wish him all the success in that genre, and hopefully, and there's still hope. For in terms of the DCEU itself, and I enjoyed Aquaman that I saw, Wonder Woman before it, and the one thing that they've proven, and all these directors for the movies in the DCEU showed unanimous support for each other. And they've proven that if you give the director the helm to do this project, to share his vision, his or her vision, then you will see success, right? And I see a lot of the narratives, the negative narrative, still levied at the DCU even now, even with the success of a lot of his films, where you're giving it praise, but at the same time, there's some negativity. You're bringing down another film to praise this one, right? And with Shazam, the positive reactions coming out of Shazam now, a lot of the headlines are reading, DCU has finally cracked it, or DCU has finally learned how to make a fun movie. And it begs the question, and I always wonder whenever I read those headlines, which character prior to Shazam would have had that tone? Couldn't possibly be Batman. Shazam is a kid in an adult's body. That is going to be a light, fun, heart-filled movie. It's not going to be Batman. It's not going to be Superman. No matter how much you love the Donner version of Superman, he wasn't like that. And even if we did go the Donner version, which is not a good fit for modern day, it just isn't, right? There's nothing wrong with loving Donner's Superman. Christopher Reeves did a brilliant job, and it worked for the time in which it was created. But that character just would not serve this time period, right? Wonder Woman certainly wouldn't be in any way similar to Shazam. So neither of these characters could be that character, right? And Flash himself would be a close one, but even in that instance, the Flash that we do have is Barry, not Wally West. And so there are a lot of, there are a lot of criticisms, and there's nothing wrong with critiquing the films, but do so on its own merits, right? If Shazam is good, then it's a good film. I've yet to see it. I'm definitely going to check it out when it comes out. And we still don't yet know what the future holds in terms of the DCEU holding together. We can only hope for the best. And if Affleck is out, I would truly miss him, because for me personally, he's the best portrayal of Bruce Wayne that I have seen on screen so far. The argument can be made that Nolan's Batman. To be honest, I love the Nolan trilogy, but I love it more so for the villains than I did for Batman himself. That Batman, Christian Bale's Batman, was very good, right? But in terms of a good combination of Bruce and Batman himself, Ben Affleck did a brilliant job for what he was given to work with. Now, I mentioned before that I would have liked to have seen Zack take BvS in a different direction, and perhaps get to the destruction of the Earth sometime a little bit later on, or it could still have followed, right? But I was thinking that for this, and this is a bit of a selfish thought, as a fan, you tend to project your own feelings on these things, and on paper it may sound brilliant, but the execution might just be rubbish. So this is just me speaking as a fan, right? And seeing a lot of the animated films, what I would have liked to have seen, and I felt what we could have done was one, remove the introduction of Cyborg and Aquaman and all that we knew was just shoehorned in because the studio executives wanted it there at this point. But I would have liked if they went the route where that nightmare sequence that Bruce had, he had a nightmare, and he's perhaps maybe seeking advice as to what the cause might be or what it might actually mean. Of course, this is an older Batman who's been around as Batman for 20 years, and he's seen things, he's met people, and I imagine in my mind that, okay, maybe at this point he knows Kent, Dr. Fate, right? Maybe not as Dr. Fate, but he knows this maybe archaeologist or some dude that has been around for a long time, who he's met over the years, and knows that there's some element of mysticism to him, but Bruce is a bit skeptical about it, willing to accept it completely yet. But he just knows this guy who's been around. They've become good friends, and he goes to Kent and asks and tells him about this dream that he has, the nightmare sequence, and asks him what it means, and Kent being the order of fate, right? He maybe just warns Bruce of what exactly is coming. And maybe on leaving the mansion, Bruce could have a run-in with Jason Blood. I think this is something that actually even happened in the animated series. I might just be recalling that. I would have loved to have seen it on screen nonetheless. So he maybe runs into Jason Blood, who at the point maybe even is having similar visions because of Etrigan, right? And maybe he's struggling to fight to keep Etrigan from taking over, because maybe Etrigan, him being a demon himself, perhaps he feels what's coming, and he also went to see Fate to try to find. In some of the animated adaptations, both Jason Blood and Kent know each other, right? So I'm thinking that, okay, he heads there as well. He runs into Bruce, and they maybe even fight each other, and then Dr. Fate steps out and says, okay, he's an old friend of mine. And right then and there, they've introduced us to Dr. Fate and Etrigan, and could do their movie later on. I would have much preferred if they introduced those two characters rather than attempting to introduce Aquaman and the Flash, and maybe even Wonder Woman to an extent there as well. So it would have gone in a different direction. It's just something I would have liked to have seen, and we would have, in this way, would have introduced the audiences to magic in this world. And I mean, we, to some extent, were able to do that with Wonder Woman. We introduced the gods, not necessarily magic per se. And so, I mean, that's, again, as I said before, that's just a fan's selfish vision of how things could have gone. And because I'm a huge fan, I love Dr. Fate. He's one of my favorite characters in the DCEU. And Etrigan himself would have just been a fun character, because although he's often on the side of good, it's usually the flip of a coin, and he's just one of those characters that would play very well on screen and pique audience's interest, right? Instead, we got a lot of characters that we are already familiar with, in a way, right? With the Flash, we already have the Flash TV show. Aquaman, people know. Yes, he's been ridiculed all these years, but people know who he is. and Wonder Woman everyone knows. So it would have been good to keep the focus on Bruce and Batman, but introduce just these two side characters that you could introduce later on, and they could appear in other films as well. So as I said, that's just my own selfish version of how I would have liked things to have gone. In case, as for where we go from here, I mean, Zack has, he has other projects that he's working on. As I said before, his directors, the other directors fully support him. The actors swear by him, in terms of how good he is to work with, the vision that he had. And if you're being fair, yes, perhaps maybe he did go a little too hard rock with the direction that he was going, too metal, and maybe that wasn't the direction to go. But I believe that if the studio stood behind him and they said, all right, this is the response that we've gotten. This is the response we've gotten from the audiences, from BvS. Then see how best you can use that, learn from it, and make some changes, rather than saying, okay, you need to rewrite there, you need to rewrite this, right? I believe if that had happened, because I don't believe he's above recognizing that, all right, maybe this is not the direction to go, maybe this is too much too fast, right? And you could have made made changes that would have worked a lot better than what we got eventually in Justice League. So a bit disappointing. I'm still very much interested to see what will happen in the DCEU, Wonder Woman 1984. Still looking forward to it. Shazam, I'm going to see it. I'm hearing good things about it. Zachary Levi is loving the role. He seems like he was born to play that character. I'm glad to see that a lot of what Zack has envisioned, a lot of these directors are standing firmly by, and people discount the fact that even though he wasn't at the helm, he still had a hand in a lot of the development of these characters. James Wan himself came out after Aquaman and said, okay, despite the studios not liking it, he went to Zack and he asked Zack for his advice in terms of what direction to take Aquaman's character, because Zack did cast Jason Momoa for the role, right? He also cast Gal Gadot, and those films turned out brilliantly. So only time will tell. We've all been asking for a Man of Steel sequel, and we don't know whether or not we'll be getting one. Is Henry Cavill still on board? Is he not? And that one's a bit tricky as well. As I mentioned before, that Man of Steel is my favorite film in the DCEU. I think Henry Cavill may not have played his cards the best way that he could have. I just feel that it's one of those situations where you should, I don't know, and I have nothing to back this up, of course. This is just this is just pure speculation on my part, right? I don't feel, he's the one cast member that I don't feel, I see a lot of, okay, I'm supporting my director, this is what he wanted to do, this is what I want to do. He's the one actor that I've not gotten that from. And so it makes me feel as though, okay, there were some rumors going on as though about what he has, demanded to continue being Superman, and it feels like one of those situations where he put himself first. Which, again, listen, if you're in the business and this seems to be the advice that your agent is giving you, maybe you'll go down, maybe you will do it, you'll do that, and I just don't think it was the right move to make. A lot of these films coming out, and what I appreciate about them, the MCU, for example, a lot of the actors there, minus a few, Robert Downey Jr., of course, a lot of them were unknown actors or up-and-coming actors, and for the most part, they didn't have a huge ego, right? They acknowledged that, okay, we're a part of something big here, something bigger than each of us individually. Yes, we know Robert Downey got his millions. That's a whole other discussion. Millions, a lot more than many of the other casts. So much so that some of them actually one left. But that aside, most of the actors were very humble in that way, right? And they're like, oh, yeah, we're a part of something bigger. As the films become more and more successful, then we can revisit our contract and we can demand more. But for me, Cavill had one film where he was the center, and it seemed as though, okay, just give me. And again, as I said, this is pure speculation, nothing to support this. But I still like him. I still love him as Superman. I still would want him to come back as Superman. If he did, it would be great. I know he's taking on a project with Netflix now to play Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher. I'm a fan of The Witcher series. I've played the games. He would not, in all honesty, have been my first pick. It'd probably have been Mads Mikkelsen, but I understand the age difference being a concern. I don't think it should have been, because Geralt doesn't age the same way normal humans do. So I don't particularly see the relevance, right? But that said, that's done, and he's cast and he's shooting, and I'm interested to see what they do with it, right? So that is all. Be sure to post down in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are about Zack's comments. What are your hopes for the DCEU? Would you like to see Zack come back? Maybe. I don't think it's too far-fetched to expect that he might actually come back sometime in the future. But for the moment, the studio might want to keep some distance to separate themselves from all the drama, and that might come with it, right? So let me know what your thoughts are. Post down in the comments. If you like what you've seen, be sure to hit like or subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.